Hey, what's up YouTube? Rafa here. So today I'm going to talk about the Glacial Hammer Juggernaut again. So this is day 3 and 4. I've been asked a ton of questions, and I promised you guys I was going to make some update videos on how my character's going. So I went ahead and put a bunch of notes in his POB, basically a lot of questions you guys asked, and a lot of things I learned about the character, and just some general ideas and stuff like that. Gonna take a look at this POB. I'll link it in the description along with the old POB. With that out of the way, let's get started. First thing I want to talk about is gems. So Divergent Trauma. This isn't something I talked about before the league because we didn't know it existed yet, but it is insane. It gives you 1% attack speed per trauma stack. This isn't showing in PoB yet because trauma isn't in PoB yet in general. With that in mind, I did add 30 stacks of trauma into PoB in the config, but this is actually much lower than we're getting normally on bosses. We're getting a lot more than 30 stacks. This is very lowballed, basically. And the attack speed isn't even showing in PoB. One cool thing you could do with trauma and diversion trauma is use a low level one for less damage taken. This is if you're struggling a lot with dying to your own trauma stacks, which a lot of people I notice have been struggling with that. So with that in mind, you could use a level 13 trauma or just a lower one in general until you can actually sustain it. Now the way you sustain trauma stacks is with big PDR or phys damage reduction. There's a lot of this. There's a lot of ways to mitigate the damage. There is phys damage reduction on your chest, your shield, Watcher's Eye. There's also phys against Ellie, which you can get on your chest as well. Past that, there's Arctic Armor, which we're using instead of Palatable Ice. And there is also just armor and endurance charges. There's a lot of ways to mitigate phys damage, and you kind of want most of them with this build. I did manage to hit 100 stacks in the lead mechanic with a level 13 trauma and increased duration. But 100 stacks is really only possible if you have insane gear or you're using a lower level gem. But that 100 stacks basically means you have 100% attack speed with Divergent Trauma. So this is a very big damage increase. Just something to keep in mind. Increased Duration Gem. Now, increased duration is actually a very big damage increase, but like I mentioned before, it's only a big damage increase on paper unless you can actually tank the stacks, because otherwise you're just going to die before you actually do damage. So increased duration good, one of the ways you scale the end game damage. Faster attacks versus hypothermia. I've been asked this question a lot. I am actually using faster attacks now. It just feels a lot better to start the ramp faster. And hypothermia didn't feel that good compared to faster attacks. I think faster attacks just better, honestly. Damage versus bosses. I've been asked a lot of questions about bossing on this character. I would recommend you don't really do Ubers on this character. It's kind of like Boneshatter. It's a situation where you can do it, but should you do it? The bosses just aren't very fun on melee. I would especially recommend you don't do Uber Cyrus unless you have 10 to 20 million DPS. This fight is just painful. He's jumping around constantly. You can't ever attack him. Your trauma stacks won't ever be up. It's just kind of annoying. Maven is very similar, but Maven won't be as bad as this fight. Now, if you want to do Uber Exarch or Eater Worlds or Shaper, these would be fine, honestly. If you want to do all your pinnacle bosses though, this is completely fine and you'll destroy them. Yoke of Suffering versus Eternal Damnation. I've been asked a lot of questions about this. Yoke is actually quite a bit worse than I thought it would be for shocking. It's still a very good item for damage, but it's a little worse than I thought it would be. We're getting 15, 20% shocks on bosses, which is not bad, but it's not as good as I thought. Eternal Damnation, however, would be very good, insane for scaling defenses. This will make you basically immune to LA damage as a Juggernaut, and it helps a lot with your biggest weakness, which is elemental dots. Elemental dots are kind of annoying on this character. Fire ground, for example, burning ground, lightning, whatever garbage, like shaper beams and stuff like that. Cold snap. All this stuff is pretty annoying and it's basically the only thing you're taking damage from while mapping. So Eternal Damnation would pretty much solve that problem completely. So I would recommend that if you want to be tankier. Shock. So I haven't really talked about shock before in this character, but it is something to consider because it does increase the damage you take from your own trauma stacks. Now there's a couple of ways to deal with shock. The way I'm dealing with it is the Pantheon, which is 60% reduced shock effect, a Jewel in the Tree, which is 25% shock effect, and a Tattoo. Now the Tattoo gives you 15% reduced shock effect, but it can only be on a 10 int passive. And we only have one in the tree, so I'll have to go on this one int node here. That's how I'm doing with it. There's another way to deal with it, which is a little bit harder. That is the Boot Implicit. It's 30% avoid ailment, 20% avoid ailment from thick skin and the nodes around it, and a 50% avoid shock Abyssal. This could be on any Abyssal, but Murderous Eye is preferable because it rolls the other stats you want. And that is one way to do it. There's something to consider though. If you're doing self-chill, that would be a very bad way to do it because you'd be avoiding the chill. But good news is, if you are doing the self-chill, you can just take the Protection Mastery. The Protection Mastery says non-damaging ailments cannot be inflicted on you while you already have one. Now, this means that if you are chilling yourself, you cannot have any other ailments. So you are effectively shock immune. And that kind of just works out really well for that. Scaling the damage further. Now, there is a lot of ways this character can get more damage. My character is far from being min-maxed. I am missing a lot of damage. I'm missing a cluster drill, which would be a lot of damage. The ideal cluster drill for damage is Martial Prowess and Calamitous. The other node is a little bit different. I think Overlord is the best, but it's kind of impossible to roll. So I think Feed the Fury or Fight the Fury would be probably the best other node to take. You have Overlord, you save a notable tattoo, which I'll talk about later, but that's just a very good option as well. And you also get the 2 jewel slots, which gives you more motor size. I'm missing Ace of Hate, which is a big DPS boost. I'm missing elemental damage on rings and belt. Actually, I did end up getting elemental damage on my rings last night, and my damage went up a lot. It was very noticeable. I really felt it. I still don't have damage on my belt yet, which will be another big increase. Enchants. I still don't have any enchants either. You want the damage pen enchant on your brutes, ideally, which is going to be from Uberla. Damage pen, 10% damage pen if you haven't killed or slain. This is a big damage boost against single target. As you can see, it's 13.5% damage increase. Very big. Definitely something to consider. And the Helm enchant. Now, there's a couple good Helm enchants. There is the Glacial Hammer increase. This is extra cold. That's not too bad. This is about a 10% more damage, which is not bad. Glacial Hammer percent damage. This is another pretty good one. But the biggest one by far will be Ancestral Protector attack speed. This is actually going to be significant because it's going to increase your trauma stacks, and it's also a big damage boost. This scales really well because it scales the attack speed off your buff effect as well. So for example, Panopticon has 50% increased buff effect. And for example, there is an alt quality which gives you increased buff effect. This is insane with the Helm enchant. This is a very big damage increase. There's one more, and that would be, I think, the Blood Rage attack speed is also an option. This is pretty good as well. Basically, there's a couple options, and a lot of them give you damage. So that's another way to get some damage. Frost Breath Corruptions. Frost Breath Corruptions will help you a lot as well. For example, I currently have percent fizz damage, but that's not ideal. You really want attack speed or flat fizz damage. Flat fizz damage and attack speed would be quite a big damage increase. About 4% more damage. That would help quite a bit as well. Watcher's Eye. Watcher's Eyes are huge for this character. Watcher's Eye would give you a lot of damage. You have Hatred. Lots of Hatred ones would give you more damage. For example, the Black Cold. That's about a 7% damage increase. There is increased cold damage in Cold Pen. Cold Pen's also very nice. Cold Pen's about a 6% damage increase. Cold damage is also a big damage increase. And then you have things like Precision Attack Speed. Attack Speed's very good. Things like Precision Attack Damage. There's so many good ones, it's honestly insane. There's also like the defensive stuff. Additional Armor. I would prefer for defensive stuff to go for a Fizz damage reduction though. This is going to affect your trauma stacks a lot more. So my ideal Watcher's Eye would probably look something like Fizz damage reduction and 2 damage mods. Whatever ones you want. Whichever ones you can get. It's like pretty insane, honestly, how good they are. Basically, you get a lot of damage from having a Watcher's Eye. That plus the Cluster Jewel, and even like Forbidden Flesh, Forbidden Flame. There's a ton of good options for that as well. If you're in Softcore. Hardcore, you don't really have that option. Also, SSF doesn't really have that option at all. You know, like I mentioned before, the increased duration, Divergent Trauma. This is going to be like your biggest damage increase. And like I said, it's not showing on PUB currently, so damage is actually quite a bit higher than this. This is even considering that we only have 15 shock. Why no Fourth Vow? Divine Flesh. I've been asked a lot of questions about this. This combo is insane. I really generally dislike it on Juggernaut though, especially because this is where you're getting a majority of your Fizz mitigation. You're going to eventually get like Fizz damage reduction, Fizz against LE, big armor. You're missing out on a lot of that. Not to mention Hatred Aura Effect and just Aura Effect in general. The chest slot is very stacked, and Fourth Vow kind of disables that. That's why I recommend is going for the Eternal Damnation if you want to be tankier. Why am I using Dawnbreaker? Dawnbreaker is just a good temporary item. This will give you a bunch of Fizz taken as Ellie, which will help the trauma stacking, and it's a big armor chest. Or sorry, a big armor shield. The ideal shield, however, would be a Cardinal Round Shield with Suppression Fractured. Fractured Suppression or Max Res would help a lot in crafting it. Otherwise, it's going to be nearly impossible to craft it. You go for a Fractured base, and then you go into Harvest and craft Fizz modifiers. This will give you Fizz damage reduction or Reflect Fizz. So it's very easy to get Fizz damage reduction and suppression that way. And then you can do stuff like Can't Be Changed, Reforged Armor, or Reforged Defenses, or Reforged Life. That would be the way you go about crafting this type of shield. And that's probably what I'll go for in the end game. How am I fitting in my auras? I've been asked this question quite a few times. If you just follow the tree and you take all the masteries and take all the passives, you'll be able to fit in Arctic Armor, Determination, and Hatred. However, I think a lot of people are missing this 8% node behind Champion of the Cause, and I just wanted to mention it in the video. Also, the Mana Mastery gives you Reservation as well. We are running Precision off of Life. That's why we have Precision on Arrogance. And that is how we're fitting all the auras in. Tattoos. I've been asked a ton of times what tattoos are good for this character. There is a couple of good small ones. I really prefer the plus strike range. I have about 6 or 7 of these. They replace strength nodes, so I have them on this side of the tree here. There's also suppression, which replaces dex nodes. I have a couple of these as well over here. And just chaos res and armor. Armor replaces strength nodes. Chaos res, I think, is any of the nodes, and I have a couple of those as well. So those are all the good ones. The big one to talk about, though, is the 30 strength notable. This is going to be Fortify on hit, and that's why we don't have Fortify on the tree, and that's why we don't need Overlord. I do think the Overlord cluster is still the best way to go, though, for the super end game, because it would allow you to get another notable. And there is one that gives you max res and max endurance charge. That would probably be the one to go for, or the one that gives Onslaught. I don't really think the Onslaught one is worth it, though, because you pretty much always have Onslaught up if you're using Tanyahi. So I do think that is where I would go with it. The Anoint. So I am currently using Acuity as my Anoint, and my initial POB I had Inveterate. That's just because I don't have accuracy to drop it. It's just giving me accuracy for precise technique, and I'm not suppression capped because of it. Ideally, you'd have Inveterate, and you'd have suppression cap because you have Inveterate on. So that's what I would do for that. If you want more damage and you don't think your yoke is shocking enough, Ash, Frost, and Storm would be very good. This will be a good damage node. It also increases the effect of your shock. It's quite a big damage node, honestly. That's something to consider. Brinksmanship and Mark for Death. So I have been switching back and forth between these two nodes. They are 4 points each. Mark for Death is really good against bosses. This gives you friendly charges against bosses, and it gives you coal. Brinksmanship is very insane for mapping. The AoE actually does affect the melee splash from Glacial Hammer, so your clear speed is a lot higher. The main reason for this, though, is the mastery. Because I'm doing Expedition, I don't like to get blocked constantly, and this has monsters cannot block your attacks. So I really like this for mapping. Softcore crit tree idea. There is an idea I had, which is something I just thought about. I haven't actually looked at it in depth yet. And that is a softcore tree for perma berserk uptime with Divine Shield. Now the tech would be use Comb Spirit. You go for a crit tree. You get a ton of rage back from untiring, so you're not recovering any HP. But you use Divine Shield and you run like an armor ES shield. And just ES on gear in general. It's gonna be about 500-600 ES, and you just have that as your buffer instead of life. But you get Perm Berserk instead, and that gives you a ton of DR. Berserk gives you a ton of damage, move speed, and attack speed, but it also gives you a bunch of DR. 19% less damage taken, which would reduce the amount of damage you're taking from trauma. This is an idea. I haven't actually tested it. It does seem like this would work, but be aware I haven't played it yet. This is an idea I had. And yeah, that's everything I kind of wanted to talk about. I pretty much went over everything I thought of, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll try to make another video once I start doing like endgame bosses more. I have been mostly doing lead mechanics outside of maps, and I just haven't really done that many bosses. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys next time.